You know that feeling when someone looks at you like you don't belong? Yeah, this story is about that. But with a twist you'll never see coming. My name is Emma. And looking back, I should have known something was off about my brother's invitation. The drive from Vermont to Riverside, Connecticut, took us 4 whole hours. 4 hours of my husband Daniel humming along to old rock songs. 4 hours of our daughter Sophie reading in the back seat, her nose buried in a beat-up copy of Anne of Green Gables. 4 hours of our son Max asking every 30 minutes if we were there yet. His excitement about seeing Uncle Brian was bubbling over, like a soda bottle left too long in the sun. Daniel dressed the way he always did. A soft blue shirt. Old khaki pants that fit him perfectly. Brown leather shoes he'd broken in just right. His hair was a little messy from the drive. Salt and pepper, slightly tousled. But he wore that easy smile. The smile of someone totally comfortable being himself. I chose a simple cream-colored blouse and navy pants, with my grandmother's pearl earrings. Sophie wore a vintage dress I'd found at an estate sale. Soft pink with delicate embroidery. The kind of quality that lasts forever. Max had on his favorite polo shirt and pressed khaki pants, looking like a mini catalog model, though he'd already wrinkled the front by the time we arrived. We pulled up the long driveway around 7 in the evening. The mansion rose before us like something from a movie. White columns gleaming in the early evening light. Windows blazing with fancy chandeliers. The lawn was perfect. Like a golf course. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Mercedes. BMWs. A Bentley that probably cost more than most people's houses. Wow, Max breathed out, pressing his face against the car window. Uncle Brian lives here. He rents here, I corrected gently, though my stomach was already tightening. Something felt wrong. Daniel said nothing, but I caught the way his eyes narrowed slightly, taking in the scene. That look he got when he was really paying attention. When he was watching and calculating. Though most people never noticed. My husband was always observing. Always thinking. Even though everyone thought he was just a quiet nature writer. I knew better. We parked between a Tesla and a Jaguar. Our Volvo wagon looked so out of place. Reliable. Safe. 8 years old. It looked like the help's car. The party spilled across the mansion's huge terrace and lawn. Women in designer dresses. Dresses that probably cost what we spent on groceries in 6 months. Men in suits so sharp they looked dangerous. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. And that particular scent of wealth. That mix of privilege that makes regular people feel like they're breathing different air. We made our way up the stone steps. Sophie's hand found mine. Her palm was a little damp. She was 9 and smart enough to sense when she didn't quite fit in. Though she'd never say it out loud. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I whispered to her. She squeezed my hand back. A lady with a clipboard met us at the entrance. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Names, please? Emma Foster. This is my husband, Daniel Miller, and our children. She scanned her list. Her expression changed slightly. Not rude, exactly. But cooler. Ah, yes. The Vermont family. Right this way. I felt Daniel's hand settle lightly on my lower back. As we followed her through the crowd. We passed the VIP zone. A raised section of the terrace with the best view. The best lighting. Small groups of people at cocktail tables draped in white linen. That's where I spotted Brian. My younger brother. Holding court in a sharp navy suit. Laughing with a circle of well-dressed guests. I expected him to see us, to wave us over, to introduce us proudly to his fiancé's friends. We'd driven 4 hours. I'd brought a gift. A special first edition book for Victoria. Something I thought she'd appreciate. Instead, Brian's eyes flickered with something I'd never seen before. Embarrassment. He glanced at the guests around him. All perfectly dressed. All shining with that new money look. Then back at us in our simple clothes. He didn't move. The lady with the clipboard led us past the VIP zone. Past the main seating area near the bar and dance floor. Past even the OK tables. We ended up at a round table tucked in the corner. Near the kitchen door. Where servers rushed past with trays. And the music was muffled by the wall. The lighting was dimmer here. The view was of the service entrance. This was the unwanted corner. Enjoy the party, the lady said. Already turning away. Daniel pulled out a chair for me. His movements slow and calm. He helped Sophie into her seat. Then Max. When he finally sat down beside me, he was silent. But I saw his jaw tighten. Just barely. Just enough. Mom, why are we sitting by the kitchen? Sophie asked quietly. It's fine, honey. We can see everything from here, I lied. My voice trying to sound cheerful. But we both knew. The seating wasn't random. It was a message. Across the terrace, Brian laughed at something someone said. His champagne glass raised high. He didn't look our way again. Daniel leaned back in his chair. His fingers drumming once, twice against the tablecloth. To anyone watching, he looked relaxed. Mildly interested in everything around us. But I knew that look. I'd been married to this man for 12 years. He was taking notes. And Daniel Miller's notes always came with consequences. The party buzzed around us like some exclusive club we weren't meant to understand. Waiters glided past our corner table without even looking. Their trays angled toward the VIP section. Laughter floated from the center of the terrace, where Brian and his fiancée Victoria held court. Under strings of pretty lights that made everything glow golden. Our corner had harsh light spilling from the kitchen. Max kicked his feet under the table. Still excited despite being stuck in the corner. When do we get to eat? I'm starving. Soon, buddy, Daniel said, ruffling his hair. He'd kept that easy smile since we sat down. But I noticed he'd positioned his chair at a slight angle. The better to watch the entire party. Always observing. Always watching for details. If only people knew what he was really doing. Movement caught my attention. Victoria was gliding toward us. Her champagne-colored dress catching light like spun sugar. She was beautiful in that perfect, calculated way. Every hair in place. Makeup applied like art. Jewelry that announced its price without words. At 28, she'd perfected the art of looking expensive. She stopped at our table. Smile fixed in place like a crown. Emma. Her voice had that tone of fake warmth. The kind I'd heard before. Usually right before someone says something mean wrapped in concern. I'm so glad you could make it all the way from Vermont. It must have been quite the journey. 4 hours, I said evenly. Not bad at all. Well, you're braver than me. I couldn't imagine living so far from civilization. She laughed. A tinkling sound. But I suppose that's the artistic lifestyle, isn't it? Brian told me you work for a charity organization. That must be so fulfilling. The way she said fulfilling made it sound like a consolation prize. Daniel's hand found mine under the table. His thumb brushing my knuckles. A silent reminder. Let her talk. It is, I said simply. Victoria's gaze swept over our children, lingering on Sophie's dress. And this must be your daughter. What a sweet vintage dress. Very quaint. Sophie's smile faltered. At 9, she couldn't quite understand the insult hidden in the compliment. But she felt its edge. It's Ralph Lauren, I said, my voice measured. From the 80s. Better quality than most things made today. Oh, absolutely. Vintage can be charming. Victoria's smile sharpened. It's just that people here tend to prefer current collections, you know? Straight from the runway. But there's something to be said for making do with what you have. Very resourceful. Making do. As if we were one step from a thrift store out of necessity. Rather than choice. A waiter appeared at the VIP section with a tray of fancy appetizers. Victoria excused herself with a graceful wave. And returned moments later. Shepherding a small group of guests toward us. Like a safari guide pointing out exotic animals. Everyone, this is Emma. Brian's sister. She gestured at me with her champagne glass. She lives secluded in Vermont to find artistic inspiration and works for a charity. A life that is, well, very relaxed. But surely a bit removed from our fast-paced world, isn't it? The guests smiled politely. Their eyes sliding over us with practiced disinterest. I could read the story Victoria was spinning. The sister who couldn't hack it in the real world. Who'd run away to the countryside to play at being rustic. Who now attended events like this as a reminder of what she'd left behind. Or failed to achieve. Actually, Daniel said mildly. Speaking for the first time since Victoria arrived. Emma manages complex projects with multiple partners and million-dollar budgets. The charity sector requires quite a bit of pace. Just less emphasis on profit margins. His tone was pleasant. Conversational even. But there was steel underneath. The kind that most people missed. Because Daniel had perfected the art of seeming harmless. Victoria's smile didn't waver. Of course. Charities are so important. Though I imagine the salary must be quite modest compared to the private sector. But that's the sacrifice one makes for passion, right? She moved on before I could respond. Her group following like ducklings. Max tugged on my sleeve. Mom, I'm really hungry. Can I get one of those things they're carrying around? The buffet table had been set up near the VIP zone. A stunning display of fancy foods under warming lights. Max was already sliding out of his chair when Victoria appeared again. As if summoned by his interest. Oh, Max. She crouched down to his level. Her dress pulling around her like liquid gold. I'm not sure those appetizers are quite right for you, sweetheart. Why not? Max asked innocently. Well, they're fancy fish eggs and expensive foods. Very acquired tastes. I'm afraid since you haven't had proper training, you'll find them hard to swallow. She tilted her head sympathetically. Tell you what, I'll have the kitchen make something friendlier for you. How about spaghetti? Or fried chicken? I'm sure you're more used to those at home. The implication hung in the air. Your family only knows simple food. You don't belong at this table. Literally or figuratively. Max looked confused. But I like trying new things. No need, Victoria. I stood, placing my hand on Max's shoulder. My voice was quiet but firm. The children will sit here and eat with their parents. We teach our kids to experience everything. They don't need to be separated. For the first time, Victoria's smile cracked slightly. I was only trying to help. We don't need help, I said, guiding Max back to his chair. But thank you. Victoria straightened, her expression cooling several degrees. She glanced at Daniel, perhaps expecting him to contradict me, to apologize for his wife's stubbornness. But Daniel just smiled blandly at her. The way he smiled at everyone. Pleasant, forgettable, utterly unreadable. Suit yourself, Victoria said finally. Though I'd hate for the children to be uncomfortable. She swept away, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and unspoken judgment. The table fell silent. Sophie picked at her napkin. Max's excitement had dimmed considerably. Across the terrace, Brian remained absorbed in his VIP bubble, laughing and toasting, completely unaware that his fiancée was treating his family like second-class citizens. Or maybe he knew and didn't care. Daniel leaned over to Max. Hey buddy, wanna know a secret? Max nodded. The best food at parties is always whatever you enjoy most. Doesn't matter if it's fancy fish eggs or chicken fingers. If it makes you happy, it's the best. He winked. And between you and me, I'd take a good burger over fish eggs any day. Max giggled, some of his sparkle returning. But I saw the way Daniel's gaze tracked Victoria across the terrace. The way his jaw set just slightly tighter. My husband was many things. Patient, observant, slow to anger. But he was also fiercely protective. And someone had just insulted his children. I had a feeling Victoria had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The party had reached its peak around 10 minutes to 8. But at our table, I was halfway through explaining to Max why he couldn't have a third appetizer. When I noticed Sophie's empty chair. My daughter had excused herself to the restroom 10 minutes ago. The knot in my stomach tightened. I stood, scanning the crowd for her blonde head. Her vintage cardigan. The one I'd found at an estate sale. Pristine condition. Better quality than anything in Victoria's closet. Then I saw her. Sophie was walking back toward our dark corner. But something was wrong. Her shoulders were hunched forward. Her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Even from here, I could see the redness around her eyes. The way she was blinking too fast. She slid into her chair without looking at me. Sophie? I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. Honey, what happened? She shook her head. Her jaw clenched tight. That's when I knew it was bad. Sophie didn't cry easily. She was too much like me. Holding everything in until it cracks. Sweetheart, talk to me. Her voice came out strangled. Barely above, can we just go home? My heart broke. What happened? Some kids. She swallowed hard. There were these girls by the bathroom. They were maybe 12 or 13. And they pointed at my shoes. I looked down at her feet. The suede flats. Soft tan color. Classic style. Worn but well maintained. I'd bought them at a vintage boutique in Vermont because they were real quality. The kind that lasts. They said. Willa's voice cracked. They said I was wearing poor person shoes. They asked if we got them from a donation bin. Because they look so old. The rage that flooded through me was instant and hot. My 9-year-old daughter. My sensitive brilliant girl who reads 3 grades above her level. And volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend. Mocked. For shoes. I reached for her hand. But before I could say anything, I heard the click of heels on marble. Victoria appeared at our table like a shark sensing blood. Oh dear, is everything all right? Her voice dripped with false concern. Pitched just loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Several guests turned to look. Champagne glasses pausing mid-sip. We're fine, I said flatly. Are you sure? Because Sophie looks upset. Victoria tilted her head. Her expression a practiced mask of sympathy. Did something happen? I opened my mouth. But Sophie spoke first. Her voice small. Some girls made fun of my shoes. Victoria's eyes flicked down to Sophie's suede flats. And I saw it. That microsecond of satisfaction before she arranged her face into understanding. Oh sweetheart. She crouched down, putting herself at Sophie's eye level. A performance of compassion. You know, children here are raised differently. Their parents are business leaders. Important people. These kids are being groomed for fancy colleges. They have very high standards. My fingers curled into fists under the table. Victoria continued. Her voice taking on a teacherly tone. Honestly, Emma, I've been worried about this. The children. They're not used to being in environments like this. Living so isolated up in Vermont. Without regular exposure to proper social settings. She sighed, shaking her head. It causes culture shock. They don't understand the expectations. The words hung in the air like poison. She wasn't defending Sophie. She was defending the bullies. Maybe next time? Victoria said, standing and smoothing her dress. You could prepare them better? Make sure their clothing is more appropriate for the occasion? It would save everyone the awkwardness. The crowd was watching now. I could feel their eyes on us. On my children. Judging. Victoria's implication was crystal clear. This is your fault, Emma. You brought your country children to a place they don't belong. Dressed them like charity cases. And now everyone's uncomfortable. I was shaking. I wanted to scream. To tell her exactly what I thought of her and her high standards. But I was frozen. Because Brian was here, somewhere in this crowd. And he was my brother. My only sibling. If I made a scene. If I caused chaos at his engagement party. I'd be the villain in this story. I stood abruptly. My chair scraping against the floor. Victoria's smile widened. Victorious. She thought she'd won. Then Daniel stood. The change in him was immediate and terrifying. Gone was the gentle, soft-spoken man who spent dinner quietly eating pasta. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stood to his full height. Moving with the kind of controlled precision that makes people instinctively step back. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there. One hand adjusting the button of his suit jacket. And the silence spread outward like ripples in water. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses stopped clinking. Daniel didn't look at Victoria. He looked at me. His blue eyes were calm, cold, and completely focused. There was a question in them. One we'd asked each other 1,000 times in our 17 years together. Have you had enough? It was the same look he gave me the day I told him about the harassment at my old job. The same look before he quietly made a phone call. That resulted in my former boss being investigated by the government. Daniel didn't make threats. He didn't need to. I thought about Sophie's red eyes. About Max's confusion when he couldn't have a burger. About being shoved into a dark corner. While Victoria paraded around in a dress that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I thought about my brother. Who I drove 4 hours to celebrate. Who hasn't once come to check on us. I looked at Daniel and nodded. The decision was made. Victoria's smile faltered as she realized something had shifted. She took a small step back. Her eyes darting between us. Suddenly uncertain. Daniel's expression didn't change. He reached down, helping Sophie out of her chair with infinite gentleness. Then did the same for Max. "We're leaving," I said, my voice steady now. And in that moment, with my husband's silent strength at my back, and my children's hands in mine, I chose their dignity over my brother's party. I chose us. Several nearby conversations paused. I could feel the attention shifting toward us. The whisper starting. Victoria's uncertainty evaporated instantly, replaced by barely concealed triumph. She straightened. That megawatt smile returning full force. "You know what? I think that's probably the smartest decision you could make right now." Her voice carried, projecting to the growing audience of guests pretending not to stare. "This is my house, after all. Mine and Brian's. I have to maintain a certain image. For our business partners. Our investors." She emphasized those last words, letting them land like stones. "My house. My house. My house." The claim hung in the air. Territorial and absolute. She wasn't just dismissing us. She was evicting us. From her domain. Like we were trespassers who'd overstayed our welcome. I was gathering Sophie's small purse when I caught it. A flicker of something on Daniel's face. Not anger. Not outrage. A smirk. It was gone in an instant. So quick I almost thought I imagined it. But I knew my husband. I'd seen that expression exactly 3 times in our marriage. Once before he negotiated a big business deal. Once before he systematically handled a competitor who tried to steal his entire team. And once before he outbid a very rich person for a property in Manhattan. Just to prove a point. It was the look of a man who'd been handed exactly what he wanted. "Emma? Emma?" Brian's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. He was pushing through the guests. His face flushed and confused. His tie slightly askew. He looked tired. The kind of deep exhaustion that comes from trying to keep up appearances all night. "What's going on?" He reached our table, eyes darting between me and Victoria. "Why are you guys leaving already?" Victoria immediately shifted gears. Her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of wounded innocence. "Oh, Brian, honey, it's not. I mean, Emma said she wanted to leave. I think she's just not comfortable here. The vibe isn't really." She trailed off delicately, letting him fill in the blanks. The implication was clear. "Your sister doesn't fit in with our crowd." Brian's face crumpled with guilt and confusion. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to feel." He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in stressed peaks. "Maybe you should take the kids back to the hotel? Let them rest? You must be tired from the drive and..." He was apologizing. To me. For Victoria's behavior. And he had no idea. My brother, standing in this mansion's grand entrance, surrounded by crystal and marble and imported flowers, actually believed he lived here. Believed this was his home, his party, his life. He had no clue that every piece of furniture he was lounging on, every room he was hosting in, every inch of this life with Victoria, existed because Daniel decided to be generous 3 years ago. Brian thought he was the host, the master of the house. In reality, he was a tenant, whose lease was about to expire. "It's fine, Brian," I said quietly, slipping my arm around Sophie's shoulders. "We'll get out of your way." No, it's not." He was flustered now, aware that people were watching, that this didn't look good. "You came all this way. I wanted you to be here. Brian, sweetheart. Victoria touched his arm. Her voice honey-sweet. Let them go. Emma clearly wants to leave, and we have guests to attend to. The business people were asking about the investment timeline. And she was steering him away, redirecting his attention like she always did. Brian's shoulders sagged in defeat. He shot me one more apologetic look before allowing himself to be led back toward the center of the party, toward the lights and the laughter, and the people who mattered in Victoria's world. Daniel was silent beside me, helping Max into his jacket with careful movements. But I saw it again. That tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth. When Victoria said, "My house." "Daniel?" I murmured as we started toward the door. "Not yet," he said softly. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. But there was something underneath it. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We were almost to the entrance when Victoria's voice rang out behind us. Bright and performative. "Drive safely. And Emma, maybe next time, let us know if you need recommendations for the children's clothing. I know some wonderful shops that aren't too expensive." The laughter that followed was polite but present. Several guests were openly watching now, champagne flutes in hand, entertained by the drama. Sophie's hand tightened in mine. Daniel stopped walking. He didn't turn around, didn't react visibly. But something shifted in the air. A change in pressure. Like right before a thunderstorm breaks. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The motion was casual, unhurried. He tapped the screen a few times, scrolling through something. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the marble entrance. "Before we go, there's something I need to discuss with Brian." The room went quiet. Victoria's smile froze. "I'm sorry, what?" Daniel finally turned. And the look on his face was pleasant. Professional. The expression of someone about to discuss a minor business detail. "Brian," he called out. "Could you come here for a moment? It's about the house." My brother emerged from the crowd again, now looking completely bewildered. "The house? What about?" "The lease," Daniel said simply. "I wanted to give you proper notice in person, since we're all here." Brian blinked. "Notice? What notice?" And just like that, the trap sprang shut. The party noise seemed to fade into a dull hum. As Daniel stepped forward, there was something different about him now. The quiet, friendly writer had vanished, replaced by someone who moved with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades in boardrooms, where millions changed hands with a signature. "Brian," Daniel said, his voice low but carrying authority. "Do you remember the name of the parent company on the lease you signed?" My brother blinked, confusion replacing the embarrassment that had been written across his face moments before. What? Why would that matter right now?" "Just answer the question," Daniel said, his tone patient but firm. Brian's forehead creased as he searched his memory. "I think it's Ironwood Holdings. I honestly don't remember the details. I just signed through the agent 3 years ago. Is there a problem with the property management or something?" The corner of Daniel's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward Brian. "Read it." Out loud. Brian leaned forward, squinting at the illuminated text. His lips moved silently at first. Then his voice emerged, shaky and confused. "Internal directive, dated April 2020. From V. Miller, Chairman. Subject, Foster Account Exception." He paused, his face going pale. Approve exception for Brian Foster's residential file. Freeze 2020 rental rates indefinitely, regardless of market adjustments. Any difference between frozen rate and current market value is to be accounted for in the chairman's family charity adjustment account. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet seemed to sense something huge happening, and let their music trail off, plunging the terrace into a deadly stillness. I don't. Brian's voice cracked. What does this mean? Victoria had gone utterly still beside him, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. I watched as understanding began to dawn on her face. Slowly at first, then all at once. Like watching ice crack across a frozen pond. It means, Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet gathering, that the luxurious lifestyle you've been enjoying for the past 3 years has been subsidized. Heavily subsidized. The market rate for this property is currently $4,200 per month. You've been paying $2,800. The frozen 2020 rate. That's a difference of $16,800 per year. Over 3 years, that's $50,400 in effective charity. Brian staggered backward, as if he'd been physically struck. No, that's not. I can afford this place. I make good money. You make a good salary, Daniel corrected gently. But you're not rich, Brian. You're what financial advisors call a Henry. High earner, not rich yet. You spend everything you make trying to maintain an image that's beyond your actual means. Without the subsidy, you couldn't afford this address. You certainly couldn't afford it while also funding those European vacations. And luxury car lease. And the country club membership Victoria insisted on. I watched my brother's face crumble. Watched him realize that every dismissive comment Victoria had made about people who don't understand quality. Every sneering remark about knowing your place in the world. All of it had been built on a foundation of charity. Charity from the man she'd been mocking all evening. Daniel turned to Victoria, whose face had transformed from its usual haughty composure into something raw and exposed. You're right about one thing, Victoria. Class cannot be faked. Real class isn't about designer labels, or knowing which fork to use, or making sure everyone sees your expensive watch. Real class is about character. About how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around us, the gathered guests stood frozen, their cocktails forgotten. The class you've been so proud of for 3 years. This address. This lifestyle. This social standing. It's been funded by my family's charity. Every time you look down on someone for wearing simple clothes instead of expensive brands. Every time you judge someone's worth by their clothes or their car. You were doing it from a position you didn't actually earn. You were living on borrowed elegance. Victoria's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up. Now, Daniel continued, and his voice took on the crisp, business-like tone. As chairman and majority owner of Ironwood Holdings, I am formally notifying you, Brian Foster, that I am exercising my right of non-renewal. As outlined in Section 12, Paragraph 3 of your lease agreement. Your current lease expires on the 30th of next month. You have exactly 30 days to secure alternative housing that aligns with your actual budget. The property process will proceed according to Connecticut state law and the terms of your contract. Daniel, please. Brian's voice broke. You can't just. I'm not kicking you out, Daniel said. And there was almost kindness in his voice now. That would be cruel and unnecessary. I'm simply declining to renew your lease at the end of its natural term. Which is my legal right as the property owner. 30 days is more than sufficient time to find appropriate housing. I'd suggest looking at the developments off Route 7. Nice places. Good schools nearby. Much more aligned with your actual income. He slipped his phone back into his pocket. Those same khaki pockets Victoria had mocked earlier for being tragically suburban. And reached for my hand. As for the question of whose house this is, he said, glancing at Victoria with something that might have been pity. I think we've established that definitively. But don't worry. You have 30 days to enjoy it. I'd suggest you make the most of them. The crowd parted as we moved toward the door. Everyone suddenly very interested in their shoes. Or their drinks. Or anything other than meeting our eyes. I could feel their stares on our backs. Could practically hear the mental recalculations happening. As they reassessed everything they'd assumed about the quiet couple in the practical clothes. At the door, Brian caught up to us. His face streaked with tears. Daniel, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were. Daniel paused, turning back. His hand came up to rest on Brian's shoulder. Not unkindly, but firm. I know you didn't. That was intentional. But Brian, you need to understand something. Your value as a person has nothing to do with this address. Or that car. Or any of it. When you figure out where your true worth lies. When you can see it in yourself without needing these expensive things to prove it. Then we'll talk. Really talk. But until then. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped outside. And I drew in a deep breath. That felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Behind us, the mansion glowed with warm light. But the warmth was fake. I could still feel the chill of judgment that had filled every corner. Sophie's hand squeezed mine as we walked toward the car. Mama, are we leaving without saying goodbye? Sometimes, I told her. The best goodbye is just walking away with your head held high. Max was practically bouncing on his toes. His earlier misery forgotten in the excitement of the dramatic exit. Dad was so cool. Did you see Aunt Victoria's face? She looked like she swallowed a lemon. Max, I said, but there was no real scolding in my voice. Daniel unlocked the car. Our practical, 7-year-old Subaru. With a dent in the rear bumper from when I'd misjudged the garage wall. And we all climbed in. As he started the engine, I glanced back at the mansion one last time. Through the tall windows, I could see figures moving, gathering. No doubt picking apart everything that had just happened. Brian stood on the front steps. Victoria nowhere to be seen. I almost feel bad for him, I murmured. Don't, Daniel said, pulling out of the circular driveway. This is the kindest thing I could do for him. He's been living in a fantasy. And fantasies always end. Better to end it now, on our terms, than to let him crash even harder down the line. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Leaving Riverside's perfect lawns behind us. Then Sophie's small voice piped up from the back seat. Daddy? Are we richer than Miss Victoria? I twisted in my seat to look at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was thoughtful. Not proud or gloating. Just trying to understand. Why didn't you say so earlier, she continued. When she was being mean about our clothes. Daniel caught her eye in the rear-view mirror. And I saw that gentle smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. That's a good question, sweetheart. And here's the thing. Being rich isn't about showing off. Or making sure everyone knows how much money you have. It's definitely not about yelling at waiters. or making people feel small. He paused at a red light, taking the moment to turn around and look at both kids. True wealth, real wealth, is having the power to protect your family and set things right, without needing to raise your voice. It's being secure enough in who you are, that you don't need everyone else's approval. Today, I taught Miss Victoria a lesson in respect. Something all her money and designer clothes can never buy her. But she was so mean to you, Sophie said, her voice small. She called your jacket tragic. She did, Daniel agreed, facing forward as the light turned green. And you know what? It is a 10-year-old jacket. The elbow patches are wearing thin. And it's probably not what anyone would call fashionable. But it's comfortable. It keeps me warm. And it reminds me of who I really am. Under all the business suits and board meetings. Sometimes the most expensive thing you can wear is authenticity. Max, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "What's going to happen to Uncle Brian and Aunt Victoria?" I considered the question carefully. They're going to have to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. To build a life based on what they actually have. Not on what they're pretending to have. Will Uncle Brian be okay? Sophie asked. Eventually, I said, and I believed it. Your uncle is smart and capable when he's not trying so hard to impress people. This might be the wake-up call he needs. As for Victoria, I trailed off, uncertain. She made her choices, Daniel finished quietly. We all do. And then, we live with them. The lights of Riverside faded behind us, giving way to darker roads, older trees. The authentic Connecticut that existed beyond the manufactured perfection of new money places. Our headlights carved a path through the gathering darkness, leading us home. Not to a mansion that required a trust fund to maintain, but to our farmhouse in Vermont. With its creaky floors and drafty windows. And garden where we grew actual vegetables. Sophie yawned, her head drooping against Max's shoulder. In the rearview mirror, I watched my children settle into the comfortable silence of a car ride home. The drama already fading from their minds. They'd remember this night, I knew they would. But not as trauma. As a lesson. Daniel's hand found mine across the center console. His callous writer's fingers intertwining with my own. We didn't need to say anything. We'd weathered the storm together. Protected our children. And walked away with our dignity intact. We hadn't won because we had more money. We'd won because we knew who we were. And no amount of judgment from people living beyond their means could change that. The car carried us forward into the peaceful night, leaving behind the glittering facade of borrowed elegance. Heading towards something real.